Few experiences in life leave scars as deep and permanent as betrayal. It is more than a broken promise, more than a moment of disappointment. Betrayal is the collapse of reality itself. Think about it. You build trust slowly, brick by brick, moment by moment. Each smile, each word, each gesture becomes part of an invisible architecture of safety inside you. You let your guard down, believing you have found someone you can rely on, a friend, a partner, a parent, even a leader. You give them access to the most vulnerable parts of your heart. And then, without warning, that entire structure crumbles. In an instant, years of trust vanish. The ground beneath you opens up, and you fall into a darkness you didn't even know existed. But here is what makes betrayal unlike any other wound. It doesn't just destroy your relationship with someone else. It destroys your relationship with yourself. You begin to ask questions that feel unbearable. How did I not see this coming? Why did I ignore the signs? How could I have been so blind? The pain is not only in the act itself, but in the echo of shame and self-doubt it awakens inside you. Carl Jung was one of the few psychologists brave enough to look at this wound directly. He realized that betrayal does not simply hurt because of what happened in the present. It reactivates something ancient, something buried deep in the human unconscious. Betrayal awakens primal fears that have haunted us for thousands of years. The fear of being cast out, abandoned, left unprotected by the very people we depended on for survival. And that's why betrayal feels so much bigger than the act itself. It's not only your personal story being shattered, it's the ancestral memory of exile, rejection, and humiliation rushing through your veins. That's why the heartbreak feels like death, because in a way it is a death. The death of your illusions, the death of the person you thought you were when you believed in that relationship. But here's the paradox. Betrayal, as devastating as it is, also carries within it the seed of transformation. In Jung's words, there is no enlightenment without confronting the darkness, and betrayal is one of the darkest nights of the soul you will ever face. This video is not about cliches or empty encouragement. It is about truth, raw, uncomfortable, and liberating. Together we will explore why betrayal wounds us so deeply, far beyond reason, how it awakens hidden forces within our psyche, exposing illusions we've been clinging to, why betrayal is not only about what others did to us, but also about what it reveals within ourselves, and finally, how this symbolic death can become a rebirth, the painful but powerful beginning of a more authentic life. So, if you've ever been betrayed, or if you want to understand why betrayal changes people forever, stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover here may not just explain your pain, it may show you how to turn it into the very thing that makes you stronger, wiser, and more awake than ever before. When betrayal strikes, most people think it's about a single act, a lie, a broken promise, a secret revealed. But the truth is, the pain of betrayal is never confined to that moment. It is the spark that ignites a firestorm inside your psyche, burning through far more than the event itself. Think of trust as a cathedral built stone by stone. Every smile, every word, every promise adds another layer to its foundation. Years of small gestures form its walls, its windows, its sacred halls. And then one act of betrayal is like an earthquake. In seconds, the entire structure collapses. Not just the walls of the relationship, but the very architecture of your inner security. Carl Jung understood this collapse as something symbolic, not just personal. He believed that human beings interpret the world through archetypes, powerful images like the nurturing mother, the loyal partner, the protective father, the faithful friend. When betrayal happens, it's not simply this person who failed you. It's the collapse of the archetype they embodied. The faithful friend reveals disloyalty. The loving partner reveals selfishness. The protective figure reveals cowardice. And with that collapse, the unconscious screams, if even this sacred role cannot be trusted, what can? This is why betrayal feels so disorienting. You don't just lose a relationship, you lose a symbol that anchored your psyche. The external world may look unchanged, but the internal world, the way you perceive reality itself, is torn apart. Then comes the flood of emotions. Shame for not seeing the signs, anger without a clear target, guilt that whispers, maybe it was my fault, and the haunting question, who am I now without this bond that once defined me? But betrayal doesn't stop at emotions. It invades the body. The heart races at night. Sleep vanishes. Obsessive thoughts loop endlessly. Appetite disappears. Confusion clouds every decision. It feels irrational, exaggerated, impossible to explain to others. But Jung would argue it is not irrational at all. It is ancient. The pain of betrayal reaches down into layers of the unconscious, where humanity's oldest fears live. For our ancestors, to be betrayed by the tribe, the family, or the partner meant death, exile, vulnerability in a hostile world. This fear is so deeply rooted in us that when betrayal strikes today, the body reacts as if survival itself is at stake. The betrayal you face in the present moment awakens the echoes of every wound you've ever carried. Rejection as a child, humiliation you tried to bury, abandonment you never fully healed from. That's why even the smallest act of deception, a hidden truth, a broken word, can trigger an avalanche that feels far greater than the event itself. Because betrayal is not just about now, it is about then. It is about every hidden wound, every buried memory, every ancestral terror of being cast out to die alone. And so betrayal becomes more than pain. It is a psychic earthquake, a rupture that shakes the foundations of both personal history and collective memory. This is why betrayal changes you, not because of what was done to you, but because of what it awakens within you. To truly understand betrayal, we have to go deeper than the surface wound. Because betrayal does not only break trust, it awakens what Carl Jung called a complex. A complex is not just a memory, it is a living force inside the unconscious, a knot of emotions, images, and fears, so powerful that once activated, it hijacks the psyche. It takes over your thoughts, distorts your perceptions, and floods your body with emotions that feel impossible to control. In the case of betrayal, Jung described something that could be called the betrayal complex. It is an archetypal wound, meaning it does not belong only to you, it belongs to humanity itself. This complex is ancient. It carries within it the terror of being excluded from the group, abandoned by the family, exiled from the tribe. For our ancestors, betrayal was not symbolic, it was survival. To be betrayed was to be left unprotected in a hostile world, to be cut off from food, shelter, and community. That primal fear is still alive within us, hidden beneath the surface of consciousness. So when betrayal strikes today, you are not just reacting to what happened in the present, you are reliving an archetypal nightmare, one that resonates with thousands of years of human memory. This is why the pain feels so overwhelming, so disproportionate, because it is not just yours, it is collective. But betrayal does something even more devastating. It forces you to confront what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is everything within us that we deny, repress, or refuse to see. Most people imagine the shadow as aggression, selfishness, or hidden desires. But it is far more subtle. The shadow also includes our naivety, our desperate need for love, our willingness to ignore red flags, our dependency on illusions, our hunger to be seen even at the cost of our own boundaries. Betrayal rips away the mask, the persona we use to move safely through the world, and forces us to see these hidden parts of ourselves. It is not just, they hurt me. It is also, why did I allow this? Why did I not see? Why did I cling to a fantasy instead of facing the truth? This realization is unbearable for the ego. The comfortable story of I was betrayed collapses into something far more painful. I betrayed myself too. And yet, within this unbearable moment lies the paradox of transformation. Because once the shadow is revealed, it can no longer control you from the dark. Once illusions are shattered, you are free to rebuild on truth instead of fantasy. Once the betrayal complex is activated, it forces you to confront not just what others are capable of, but what you yourself have denied within. This is why betrayal is not just an ending, it is a mirror. A brutal reflection showing you parts of yourself you never wanted to see, but must see if you are to grow. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Betrayal is often not a random accident. It is the eruption of unconscious patterns that were already at play, the shadow demanding to be seen. And in this confrontation lies the first step of transformation. Because betrayal, in exposing both the darkness of others and the darkness within, opens the possibility of something rare, lucidity, the painful clarity that can break you or awaken you. Betrayal is not just pain. It is not even just the collapse of trust. At its deepest level, betrayal is a death. Not a physical death, but a symbolic one. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the illusions you once lived inside. The death of the identity you built around someone else's loyalty. When you are betrayed, something inside you implodes. The person you used to be cannot survive the truth you have just witnessed. And this is why betrayal feels so terrifying. It does not only destroy your connection with another, it destroys the self you were within that connection. Carl Jung described this moment as the collapse of the ego. The ego is the mask, the persona, the fragile image you construct to give life order and meaning. Betrayal shatters that mask. What once seemed stable disintegrates. What once felt solid melts into nothing. You are left face to face with the void, and the void is unbearable. Nights feel endless. The mind obsesses, searching for answers. The body aches with anxiety. Every part of you longs to return to the safety of before. Before the lie, before the collapse, before the death of certainty. But there is no going back. The person you were no longer exists. That self has died. And yet, in the midst of this devastation lies a strange hidden possibility. Because in Jungian psychology, every symbolic death is also a potential rebirth. When the ego collapses, the unconscious rushes forward. Dreams become vivid, symbols arise, intuitions sharpen, the psyche, stripped of its illusions, begins to reorganize itself. This is why Jung believed that betrayal, as cruel as it feels, carries with it a unique transformative power. It is not only destruction, an initiation into a deeper awareness of reality, one no longer built on fantasies but on truth. The pain, if accepted, becomes a teacher. It teaches you that love without boundaries is dependency, that trust without discernment is blindness, that illusions, no matter how beautiful, cannot protect you from the darkness of the human heart. And this is the paradox of betrayal. What feels like the end is also the beginning. What feels like death is also the seed of rebirth. But this rebirth is not automatic. Many people remain trapped in the ruins, clinging to bitterness, replaying the story, closing their hearts forever. Others, however, allow the death to do its work. They surrender to the collapse, walk through the darkness, and emerge as someone new, stronger, clearer, more whole. Betrayal then becomes a rite of passage, a brutal initiation into the truth of life, that no bond, no person, no illusion can define you, and that from the ashes of your shattered self, a more authentic self can rise. If betrayal is a death, then what follows must be a rebirth, but not a return to who you once were. That version of you no longer exists. The only path forward is transformation. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole by integrating all parts of the psyche, both light and shadow. It is not about perfection. It is not about being free from pain. It is about becoming conscious. Betrayal, as devastating as it feels, can serve as the doorway to this transformation. Because betrayal forces you to confront illusions you would have otherwise protected. It strips away the false comfort of naivety. It reveals your shadow, your neediness, your dependency, your blindness. And once revealed, these hidden forces can finally be integrated. The first step is acceptance. Acceptance that you were betrayed. Acceptance that you did not see, or did not want to see what was happening. Acceptance that you are not only a victim, but also a participant in the patterns that allowed it. This acceptance is brutal, but it is also liberating, because what you accept no longer controls you. The second step is integration, taking the shadow, the denied parts of yourself, and bringing them into awareness, recognizing your own vulnerabilities without shame, owning your patterns of denial, understanding the ways in which you gave away power, ignored boundaries, or clung to illusions. This does not mean blaming yourself. It means reclaiming yourself. And then comes the third step, reconstruction. From the ruins of betrayal, you begin to build a self no longer based on illusions, but on truth. You learn to set clearer boundaries, to trust your intuition when something feels wrong, to choose relationships not out of desperation, but out of alignment, to see others not as saviors or destroyers, but as human beings with light and shadow, just like you. This transformation is not quick. It does not happen in weeks or even months. The ego resists. The old self clings to what has already died. But the longer you walk this path, the more you realize that betrayal, instead of ending you, is reshaping you into something stronger. And perhaps the most profound gift of individuation after betrayal is compassion. Not the naive compassion that excuses everything, but a deeper, wiser compassion. The understanding that all humans are capable of both loyalty and betrayal, of love and cowardice, and that by confronting this truth within ourselves, we can finally see others more clearly, not as gods to be idealized, not as demons to be feared, but as flawed beings just like us. This is the paradox Jung revealed. Betrayal, which seems to shatter you, can also be the very force that makes you whole. Because in the collapse of illusions, you are forced into reality, and only in reality can you become your truest self. Individuation, then, is the ultimate answer to betrayal, not denial, not bitterness, not revenge, but transformation, the death of the old self, and the birth of a self that is stronger, freer, and more awake than ever before. Every betrayal is a death, but if you face it with courage, it can also become a rebirth. This rebirth does not erase the pain, it does not make you forget. It does not restore the world to what it once was. Instead, it gives you something far more valuable, the strength to live in truth. When the illusions collapse, the psyche begins to rebuild on a new foundation, and the person who emerges from betrayal is never the same as the one who entered it. At first, this new self feels fragile, as if you are walking on unfamiliar ground, but slowly you notice changes. You begin to trust differently, no longer blindly, but consciously, no longer with naive surrender, but with deliberate choice. Your intuition sharpens. You sense dishonesty, not in words but in tone, in silence, in subtle gestures. You no longer dismiss the inner warning signs you once ignored. What was once blindness becomes sight. Boundaries, too, take on a new strength. Where before you may have tolerated too much, now you recognize your worth. You know what you will accept and what you will no longer allow. This does not close your heart. It opens it, but with wisdom, and perhaps most surprising of all, compassion deepens. Not the naive compassion that forgives everything without discernment, but a grounded compassion born from understanding human weakness, both in others and in yourself. You see how easily people betray not only others but themselves. And this awareness does not harden you, it softens you while keeping you awake. This is the paradoxical gift of betrayal. It makes you more selective, yet more authentic. It strips away illusions, yet deepens your appreciation for what is real. It forces you to see manipulation and deceit, but also teaches you to cherish genuine love and loyalty when you find it. Carl Jung described individuation as becoming whole, and betrayal, as devastating as it feels, is often the fire that forges this wholeness. Through the symbolic death, you are reborn as someone who no longer needs to live on illusions, who no longer gives away their power blindly, who no longer seeks safety in others at the expense of their own truth. The rebirth after betrayal is not about becoming untouchable, it is about becoming unshakable. Not because you will never be hurt again, but because you now know that even if you are, you will rise. Betrayal changes you forever, but what it changes you into, bitter and closed, or awake and whole, depends on whether you accept the invitation hidden within the pain. After betrayal, nothing looks the same, but that does not mean the world has changed. It means you have changed. You begin to walk through life with new eyes. What once seemed safe now looks fragile. What once seemed ordinary now carries hidden meaning. And what once seemed invisible, the subtle patterns, the quiet red flags, the unspoken truths, now shines with painful clarity. At first, this new vision can feel like a burden. You notice things others ignore. You feel the dishonesty in a smile. You sense the emptiness behind a promise. And you realize how much of human interaction is built on illusion. But slowly this clarity becomes a gift, because you no longer stumble blindly into the same traps. You no longer confuse fantasy for reality. You no longer surrender your power for the comfort of a lie. In relationships, you approach differently. You still love, but you love awake. You still trust, but with discernment. You still give, but without losing yourself in the giving. This is not cynicism, it is maturity. And in yourself you see with honesty. You recognize your shadow, your neediness, your fear of being alone, your hunger for validation. But instead of letting these forces control you in secret, you acknowledge them, you integrate them, you make peace with the parts of you that once betrayed yourself. Living with new eyes also changes how you view pain. You no longer see suffering only as punishment. You see it as initiation, a brutal teacher, yes, but a teacher nonetheless. The wounds of betrayal become scars, and the scars become symbols. Symbols of what you survived, symbols of who you became. Carl Jung believed that true transformation comes when we stop projecting perfection onto others and begin cultivating wholeness within ourselves. Living with new eyes means you no longer expect others to complete you. You no longer hand them the power to define your worth. Instead, you carry your own center, your own truth, your own strength. And paradoxically, it is this inner freedom that allows you to connect more deeply with others. Because you are no longer clinging to them out of fear. You are no longer blind to who they really are. You can see them fully, their light and their shadow, and choose consciously whether to let them in. This is the awakening betrayal brings, a painful clarity, a freedom born not from escaping the darkness, but from walking through it. And once you see with new eyes, you cannot go back. The world has changed forever, because you have. No one walks away from betrayal unchanged. It leaves a mark too deep, a wound too sharp, to simply fade with time. But what that wound becomes, a scar of bitterness, or a seed of awakening, is the final choice only you can make. Many remain trapped in the ruins. They replay the story endlessly. They build walls around their hearts, convinced that safety lies in never trusting again. They carry their bitterness like armor, but that armor becomes a prison. The betrayal continues to live inside them, long after the betrayer has gone. Others, however, take a different path. They let the wound teach them. They accept the death of illusions, even when it breaks them. They face their shadow, even when it shames them. They allow the collapse to strip away everything false, and in that emptiness, they find something new. This is the path Jung described. Not denial, not revenge, but individuation, the process of becoming whole. It is a painful road, yes, but it is also the only road that leads to freedom. Because betrayal, as devastating as it feels, can awaken you to truths you would never have chosen to see. It can teach you that your worth is not defined by another, that your safety does not depend on illusions, that your strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from walking through it. And once you emerge from that darkness, you are no longer the same. You are sharper, wiser, more authentic. You know what trust really means. You know what love requires. And you know that even in the face of collapse, you can rise again. So the question is not whether betrayal will change you. It already has. The question is, what will you do with that change? Will you let it harden you into bitterness, or will you allow it to awaken you into wholeness? If this reflection speaks to you, take a moment to share your story in the comments. Your words may not only help you release some of the weight you carry, but they may also guide someone else who is lost in their own darkness. And if you wish to continue this journey of understanding the mind, of learning how pain, shadow, and transformation shape who we are, subscribe to this channel. Stay with us, because together we will keep exploring the truths most people are too afraid to confront. Betrayal is both a wound and an invitation to rise from the ashes of who you were and to become who you were always meant to be.